بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Our lecture today is on the life and the creed of Imam Abu Haneefah rahimahullahu ta'ala. Now when we look at the Muslim Ummah, we see that the entire Muslim Ummah ascribes to four men in terms of the understanding, the fiqh, the jurisprudence of the religion. And these four men, these four great men, in Arabic we say al-a'immatil arba', the four imams, we see that each of them, they strove to derive the rulings from the Quran and from the Sunnah, the rulings that relate to the ibadat, the actions of worship, and the rulings related to the mu'amalat, the dealings that we have with each other. So the ibadat, this is clear, that which relates to you and your Lord in terms of the worship, the affairs of worship, the tahara, the salah, the zakah, the hajj, the sawm, and so on and so forth. And likewise the mu'amalat, the dealings that we have, the dealing of marriage, the dealing of contracts and trade and business, the inheritance and so on and so forth. So in these issues, these imams, they strove to clarify the religion, the rulings of the religion for the people at large, and they laid down many, many great and important principles that help us to understand the religion. And so we find that the people in the Ummah, they ascribe to one of these four imams. So we have those who say that we are Hanafi, those who say that we are Maliki, those who say that we are Shafi'i, and those who say that we are Hanbali. And this is an ascription, when they make this ascription, this is an ascription in almost all cases to the fiqh, to the jurisprudence, to the understanding and the usul of these imams as it relates to how do they derive rulings from the Quran and the Sunnah. However, whilst this is an ascription to fiqh, in terms of fiqh, the jurisprudence, there's something which is even more fundamental and more important, which is that these imams, that these four imams were also united and agreed overwhelmingly and almost in everything in the issues of aqeedah. And this is something even more important. The issue of fiqh is something that is a branch that branches off from the affairs of tawheed and iman and aqeedah. And so when we look at these imams from the point of view of the actual aqeedah, the creed that they were upon, this is something that all Muslims should investigate and look at, because they will find that these imams in just about almost everything were actually united in the usul of the religion. The usul, when we say the usul, when we use this word usuluddin, we have to be very clear what we mean by this word, because this word is used by different parties and different groups to mean something else. So the word usul and usuluddin, when we speak of the foundations of the religion, this refers to the 6 pillars of iman. The 6 pillars of iman. This is how it is understood with Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah. When we use this word, usuluddin, it is to believe in Allah and His name and His angels and His books and His messengers, the last day, and al-qadr, it's good and it's evil. So this is how we understand usuluddin. There's another usage of the word usuluddin, foundations of the religion. This is an innovated, it is a newly invented understanding of usuluddin. It was not known, it was not taught by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was not known by any of the Sahaba. It was not known by any of the Tabi'een, nor was it known by any of the Tabi'een. This understanding of Usuluddin is the understanding with the people of Kalam, Ilmul Kalam. And they say that the Usuluddin refers here to primarily establishing and proving Allah's existence by way of reason, by way of rational proofs. That this is the foundation of Usuluddin. And then following on from this to prove and establish the prophethood, and then after this follow on other affairs. So these people who built their religion upon this ilmul kalam, when they use the word usuluddin, this is what they mean. And this is different to what is meant and understood by the people of the Sunnah. The people of the Sunnah, it is the 6 pillars of Iman. So the point that we are making here at the very beginning is that the 4 Imams, they were united in the usuluddin, meaning in terms of what they believed with respect to Allah and His Tawheed and His names and His attributes and His angels and books and messengers and the last day and Al-Qadr, its good and its evil. They were united in all of these affairs. So for that reason, when we speak of any Imam, whether it be Imam Abu Haneefah rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, that which we look at first and foremost is his creed, is his aqidah. Because as we said, all of them were united in following the way of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. And for that reason, before we continue, we should mention that when we look at the creed of all of these Imams, we can broadly, and the usul, the foundations, we can broadly summarize their da'wah into 3 important principles, which if every Muslim in every part of the world was to adhere to, and which if they were to identify in each of these Imams, it would be a great source of unity for the whole Ummah. And those 3 foundational principles are, number 1, the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, number 2, al-ittiba', which is following the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and thirdly, following the understanding of the Sahaba, or the understanding of the Salaf. All of these Imams, that's what they were actually pursuing. That's what they were upon. This was the foundation of their entire religion. As for the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is to single out Allah, ifradullahi bil ibadah. To single out Allah in every form and type of worship, meaning to direct worship only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is because this naturally follows on from our belief and our conviction that there is no creator, no provider, no sustainer, no one who gives life, no one who takes life, no one who provides benefit, no one who repels harm, except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a conviction that every person, in fact every person is born upon this. This is called the fitrah. This is called the natural disposition upon which everybody is born upon, whether he be born to Jews or Christians or non-Muslims or whatever. Every person is born upon this inherent conviction that there is a Lord and He creates, provides, owns, sustains, gives life, takes life, gives benefit, repels harm. So this is something natural. So this Tawheed is something that follows on from that conviction, which is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala therefore should be called upon, should be prostrated to, should be bowed to, should be sacrificed for, should be hoped and loved and feared with a hope and a love and a fear that is specifically for Him alone. This is the Tawheed that is the first and the mightiest principle of the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's what these Imams, that's what they were upon. They were united upon this, as we shall see from some of the statements later on. The second principle is the Sunnah, following the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Sunnah is revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is something which explains and clarifies the Quran. It explains and clarifies the rulings in the Quran. And the Quran cannot be understood except by way of the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the proof of following the sunnah is evident in the Quran. There are many evidences, but here in terms of the principle, we see that all of these imams, when you look at their usul, you see that they refer back to the sunnah. And the third thing is the following of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, or those whom we call the Salaf, those who are the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, and the Tabi'een, the first three generations of the Muslims. In fact, Abu Haneefah himself, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, alayka bil athar. Alayka bil athar. Upon you is to follow the narration which comes from those who preceded, those who came first, meaning the Tabi'een and the Sahaba. وَطَرِيقَةِ السَّلَفِ. So upon you is the athar and the path of the Salaf. وَإِيَّاكَ وَكُلَّ مُحْدَثَةٍ فَإِنَّهَا بِدْعَةٌ. So he said, beware of every single newly invented affair, for verily it is an innovation. It is an innovation. So we see that this is something Abu Haneefah himself said, and he was the first of the four Imams. He was born in 80 Hijrah, the year 80 Hijrah. And whenever we look at any of these Imams, we have to understand and look at the circumstances in which they lived. This will give us a better understanding of this Imam and many of his statements, many of his positions. So without understanding history, we will never really truly understand the reality of the person that we are speaking of. So Abu Haneefah rahimahullah ta'ala, he was born in the year 80 Hijrah, and by the year 80 Hijrah, there were a number of different sects which had appeared. There were the Khawarij and the Rafida, the Shia. They were the first two sects to appear. And likewise the Qadariyyah, those who denied al-Qadr. They had just appeared around that time, at the time that Abu Haneefah rahimahullah ta'ala was born. And he lived for a period of 70 years. Rahimahullah, he died in the year 150 Hijrah. This means that he was present at the time when in the 2nd century, the general overall group that we call the Ahlul Kalam, the people of Kalam, when they appeared at the beginnings of the 2nd century. And we mean here specifically the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila. The Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila. So they appeared in the direction of Iraq, from Iraq, in various places in Iraq. And Abu Haneefah rahimahullah, he was in Iraq, he was born in Iraq, and he was present in Iraq. And so we have to understand all of these circumstances when we come to look at some of the views and positions of Abu Haneefah rahimahullah a bit later on. So with this brief introduction, we're going to now look at the lineage of Abu Haneefah rahimahullah and a bit about his birth and a bit about what led him to seeking knowledge, and also what some of the scholars have said about him in praise of Abu Haneefah rahimahullah ta'ala. So his name, Abu Haneefah's name rahimahullah ta'ala, does anybody know Abu Haneefah's name? An-Nu'man bin Thabit bin An-Nu'man bin Thabit bin Zuta. So his kunya is Abu Haneefah, as we know, this is what he's famously known with. But his name is An-Nu'man, the son of Thabit. His father's name is Thabit bin Zuta. Zuta is his grandfather's name. And there are some other variations of the names given to his grandfather, but this is the name that has been given to him. And then after this there are a number of ascriptions. So we have An-Nu'man bin Thabit bin Zuta. At-Taymi is an ascription, At-Taymi, to a tribe. And Al-Kufi is an ascription to the place where he was present, where he lived, where he resided, which is Kufa in Iraq. Now, this needs some explanation. It needs some explanation. So, what we need to understand is that his grandfather who is referred to as Zulta, he was from the people, it is said, of Kabul. Kabul, which is present-day Afghanistan, which in those days was known as, generally as Persia, as Faris. So his father used to be from the people of Kabul, and when the Arabs, when they spread Islam, and obviously in those days they would take slaves. And so his grandfather, he was taken like this by Banu Taymillah. This was a tribe amongst the Arabs. Banu Taymillah bin Tha'laba. And what happened is that his grandfather became a Muslim. Zulta, he became a Muslim. And therefore he was freed. He was a freed slave. He was freed by the tribe. And then his son, Thabit, who is the father of Abu Hanifa, he was born upon Islam. So the grandfather was upon other than Islam. And then he accepted Islam, he was freed, and then his son Thabit was born upon Islam, and then his son Abu Hanifa, An-Nu'man bin Thabit, then of course he was born upon Islam. So this is the start of Islam in the lineage of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. So what happened therefore is, because Zulta, he remained with the tribe of Banu Taym, his ascription therefore became a Taymi. So this is an ascription not because his lineage goes back to this tribe, but because he had allegiance to this tribe. So we need to distinguish that sometimes a person can be given a tribal name because of his allegiance to the tribe, not because he is from the descendants of that tribe. So here, when we say that Abu Hanifa is An-Nu'man bin Thabit bin Zulta at-Taymi, it means at-Taymi by way of allegiance to the tribe of Banu Taymillah. So we should be very clear about that. Now, as for his father used to sell silk. He used to sell silk, and he used to also have a shop selling garments, and his father used to earn a halal living by way of selling silk. And Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he took this profession from his father, and he himself was born in Kufa. And the family, now of course the family had already accepted Islam, as we mentioned, and so his family was a righteous family, a fairly well-off family, and a noble family. And Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he followed the profession of his father, so he entered into the same trade, into the same business, and he was like someone who traded in silk, and he would also sell garments, and he had a shop. His father had a shop in Kufa. And Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he used to be involved in his father's trade, and he displayed a great level of amana and sidq. Amana and sidq. Trustworthiness and honesty. We can give one or two examples of this, which are narrated about Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. One of the examples which is mentioned about him is that once he went to buy a garment, a thobe, from a woman trader. And so she offered to sell it at 100 dirhams. So Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he said, increase it in price. So she said, okay, 200 dirhams. So then he said, no, increase it more in price. She goes, are you sure? He said, yes. So she said, 300 dirhams. Then he said, no, increase it more in price. So she said, 400 dirhams. And then he said, no, increase it more. And she goes, are you sure? And then he said, okay, go and bring me another tailor, someone who's nearby. So then another tailor came by, and he said to her, ask this man what this thobe is worth. So the man looked at it and he said, this is 500 dirhams. This is worth 500 dirhams. So then Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he gave the woman 500 dirhams to purchase the actual thobe. Now what does this tell you? This tells you that Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he knew that the woman was underselling the garment by a great deal, much less than what it was actually worth. So from his honesty untrustworthiness, rather than finding a bargain, he actually paid the actual price for what the garment is worth, and he informed the woman of that as well. That's one example mentioned. A second example mentioned is that he was selling a garment to a lady, and he was going to sell it for 4 dirhams. 4 dirhams, which is absolutely nothing. So the woman said, this is not right, this cannot be right. This is absolutely not right. This is not right. And so Abu Haneefah, rahimahullah, he said that the reason why it's 4 dirhams is because I bought 2 garments. The first one which I sold, I managed to get all of my capital back and whatever is on top of that. I managed to get everything back and whatever is on top of that, except for 4 dirhams. So in other words, I was 4 dirhams short on the trade and profit, whatever else, from the first garment. So therefore, I'm selling the second garment only for 4 dirhams. So he sold the garment for 4 dirhams. Which, what this tells you here really is that Abu Haneefah, rahimahullah, he's maintaining a reasonable amount of profit and trade on whatever he's selling. Meaning, he's not raising the profit to such a degree, even though it might be possible, but he's remaining within that which is reasonable and that which is acceptable, and not going beyond that. So these are examples that are given about Abu Haneefah rahimahullah as a businessman, which shows his amana and his sidq, his truthfulness and his honesty. So one day when he was going to the market, one day, and he met a great scholar and a great imam by the name of Ash-Sha'bi. Ash-Sha'bi rahimahullah ta'ala, his name is Amir bin Shirahil al-Hamadani, known as Ash-Sha'bi. Ash-Sha'bi rahimahullah ta'ala was born in the year 21 Hijrah. So he was born literally almost 60 years before Abu Haneefah rahimahullah ta'ala. And he was someone who took knowledge from the Sahaba. He took knowledge from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. He took knowledge from Aisha radiyallahu anha. He took knowledge from Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu, and many other Sahaba. So he met Ash-Sha'bi, and Ash-Sha'bi said to him, Ash-Sha'bi was sitting, and he called Abu Haneefah over, and he said, where are you off to? Where are you going to? He said, well, I'm off to the market. And I'm going to see my teacher. And by teacher he meant the one who is teaching him the trade. And so he said, I didn't ask you about the market. I'm asking you, where are you going to? Who are you going to? From the scholars, from the ulama, from the actual scholars of the religion. And he said, well, I don't really spend much time with them. I don't really frequent them that often. And so Ash-Sha'bi said to him, don't do that. Rather, you should look into knowledge. وَعَلَيْكَ بِالنَّظَرِ فِي الْعِلْمِ. Upon you is to look into knowledge and to sit amongst the scholars. For indeed, فَإِنِّي أَرَى فِيكَ يَقْظَةً وَحَرَكَةً. For indeed, I see amongst you, I see within you, I see that you are someone who is quite perceptive. You are alert, and you also have a great deal of activity. You have a great deal of zeeg and vigor and activity. So upon you is to go and sit with the scholars and to seek the knowledge. So when Abu Haneefah, when he heard this, he said, فَوَقَعَ فِي قَلْبِي مِنْ قَوْلِهِ فَتَرَقْتُ الْإِخْتِلَافِ إِلَى السُّوقِ وَأَخَذْتُ فِي الْعِلْمِ فَنَفَعَنِيَ اللَّهُ بِقَوْلِهِ. He said, so what happened is in my heart, his speech, it entered into my heart, it affected my heart. And I abandoned frequenting the market, and then I began to take knowledge. And Allah, He benefited me by way of this. So this is the starting point of Abu Haneefah rahimahullah ta'ala in him seeking the knowledge. So in the first part of his life, now this is really at the early part of his life, this is, barely reaching his 20s at this stage. And so he went and he began to seek knowledge in certain areas. First of all, in the knowledge of Arabic grammar. He sought knowledge of Arabic grammar. And then, now because he was living in Kufa, and that's why I said to you at the beginning that when we speak about people and the biographies, we have to understand the circumstances in which they live. So when he sought knowledge at the very beginning, he learnt Arabic grammar. He also, because there were many in that early period in Kufa, it was the starting point of when there began to be many debates and discussions and arguments with different types of groups and parties, with the Qadariyyah, there used to be a group of Hindus called the Sumaniyyah, and we're going to mention a narration about them a bit later on, inshallah ta'ala. So he entered into debating with the people of misguidance and the atheists and other than them. And he became quite skilled in that regard, and he became quite skilled. And it is also mentioned that he also debated and argued with Jahm bin Safwan. Jahm bin Safwan is the founder of the Jahmiyyah, those people who entered upon the Ilm al-Kalam and speaking about Allah's attributes and so on and so forth. So he refuted the Mu'tazila, when the Mu'tazila appeared later on in his life, he spoke about them, refuted the Khawarij, refuted the atheists, likewise the extremist, the Shia, the Rafida. So he was involved in this for an initial part of his life. So then what happened is, he then turned towards seeking knowledge of fiqh. And the reason why that happened was because a woman came to him and she asked him a question regarding divorce. And he didn't know the answer. So he said to her, go to this man, and there was a man, another alim called Hammad bin Abi Sulaiman. Hammad bin Abi Sulaiman. He was a faqih. And so he said, go and ask Hammad bin Abi Sulaiman, and when you've asked him and he gives you the answer, then come back and tell me the answer. So what happened is that the woman had a question about divorce, and so she went and asked Hammad bin Abi Sulaiman, and then she came back to Abu Haneefah and said that this was the answer he gave, that basically there's a certain period of time after the divorce is pronounced. So she told him the answer, and then Abu Haneefah realized that I don't really have any understanding in these affairs, so therefore I need to turn towards fiqh. So the early part of his life, he was involved in arguing, debating, refuting the people the people who were present in his time, and then he turned towards seeking fiqh in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is when he realized that he needs to spend time with Hammad bin Abi Sulaiman rahimahullah ta'ala. Now Hammad bin Abi Sulaiman, he was a sheikh from the sheikhs of Kufa. He was a jurist, and Abu Haneefah spent 18 years in total with him. Spent 18 years sitting with him almost every single day, visiting him in his house, and having a great deal of respect for him. Now Hammad bin Abi Sulaiman, before we go any further, that's why I keep saying to you that we have to keep history in mind. Who is Hammad bin Abi Sulaiman? Hammad bin Abi Sulaiman is from those people who began to speak about what became known later as al-Irja. Al-Irja. Al-Irja is one of the four main innovations which appeared in the first century of Islam. There were the Khawarij, then there was the Rafida, then there was the Qadariyyah, then there was the Murji'ah. And the Murji'ah are those who held a certain view with respect to Iman. What is the reality of Iman? What is the nature of Iman, faith? And Hammad bin Abi Sulaiman was one of the first people to speak with this, which is an innovation. And the reason why this happened was because of the following. First of all, number one, is that, as you know, the Khawarij, when they appeared, they began to declare the Muslims to be disbelievers, those who committed a major sin. So a Muslim, for example, who fell into a major sin, maybe he drank, or maybe he lied, or maybe he stole, or maybe he did something that was a major sin. So the Khawarij, they said that anyone who falls into a major sin, then he has committed kufr, and therefore he will abide in the hellfire forever. Now obviously this saying is batil, it is false. And so in response to this, these jurists from Kufa, those who were present in Kufa, when they responded to this innovation, they responded to this innovation with something which was also incorrect. So they reasoned in their minds, they said, well, if the Khawarij are saying that a person who commits a major sin, so he falls into a major sin, or he abandons an obligation, and if they are saying that he becomes a disbeliever, we know this is not correct, this can't be right. This must mean, therefore, that actions cannot be from Iman. Actions cannot be from faith. And if we say that actions are not from Iman, we have therefore answered the problem of the Khawarij. Because now if the Khawarij say a man who sins, then we know he can't be a disbeliever, because sinning and avoiding sin is not actually from Iman. Iman is just something what's in the heart and what's expressed by way of the tongue. So they expelled actions from the reality of Iman as a means of answering the bid'ah of the Khawarij. And this is a mistake. This is a mistake, because in the view of Ahlul Sunnah as a whole, all of the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the Tabi'een, they are agreed that Iman or faith, it consists of belief in the heart and speech upon the tongue and actions of the limbs. All of these they are within the circle of Iman. We can't take any of these three things outside the circle of Iman. So what Hamad bin Abi Sulaiman and those jurists from Kufa, what they did, the fuqaha from Kufa, they made a mistake in this regard, and they took Iman and they took it outside of the circle of, they took actions, the a'mal, the actions, and they took it outside the circle of Iman, and they put them outside here. So now if a person commits a major sin, or they keep away from an obligation, it doesn't matter, because they won't become a disbeliever. Now this is true, but it's true for the wrong reason. It's true for the wrong reason. The reason why they are not disbelievers is because their Iman, although it has decreased, it hasn't been invalidated, it hasn't been negated. This is the correct position. That a person who commits a major sin, his Iman has decreased and diminished. He's a weak believer. He's weak in his faith, but his Iman is still present. Okay? So the teacher of Abu Haneefah rahimahullah ta'ala, he was upon this mistake in the field of Iman. And for that reason, this mistake carried through and continued amongst the Hanafis, from Abu Haneefah rahimahullah ta'ala to his students. And then when we see Imam al-Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala, when he came in the 3rd and 4th century, we see that this carried through amongst the Hanafis. And then likewise today, when we see the Maturidis and other than them, they maintain they are still upon this particular this mistake. So this is something that we need to be aware of with respect to the teacher of Abu Haneefah, Hamad bin Abi Sulaiman rahimahullah ta'ala. So when he turned to this fiqh, then he turned towards at the age of 21 years old, he turned towards this fiqh, and he studied with Hamad bin Abi Sulaiman, as we said. And with respect to this, it is said about Abu Haneefah rahimahullah ta'ala, the things which I mentioned about him, that he excelled in this fiqh. That when he entered into fiqh, he would sit with Hamad bin Abi Sulaiman, he would memorize everything that Hamad bin Abi Sulaiman used to say. So he would memorize his statement, then he would come the next day, and he'd have the thing memorized. And when Hamad bin Abi Sulaiman saw this in Abu Haneefah, he would make him sit in front of the gathering, as opposed to anybody else. So he would sit in front. So this went on for 18 or 20 or so years. And then when Hamad bin Abi Sulaiman, when he passed away, then Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he took his position, and so he became the faqih of the whole city, and eventually the whole country, people would travel to him to seek the knowledge of fiqh. Now the scholars have praised him and mentioned things about him. We shall come to those in a short while, inshallah ta'ala. But if we look at his teachers and his students, as we said, his main teacher was Hamad bin Abi Sulaiman, but there was also many of the tabi'een, many of the major tabi'een that were from his teachers. From them is Ata bin Abi Rabah, Ata bin Abi Rabah, and likewise Ikrimah. These are students of the Sahaba from whom he took knowledge. Likewise Nafi' and Amr bin Dinar and Qatada bin Da'ama and Mansur bin al-Mu'tamar, and all of these are from the major ones amongst the tabi'een. I'll mention them again: Ata bin Abi Rabah, Ikrimah, Nafi', Amr bin Dinar, Qatada, and other than them. As for the students of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, from his students are Abu Yusuf the Qadi, Yaqub Abu Yusuf al-Qadi Abu Yusuf rahimahullah ta'ala, Zufar bin al-Hudayl, and Nuh bin Abi Maryam, Muhammad bin al-Hasan al-Shaybani. And there are also some famous scholars. Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah ta'ala was a student, he took knowledge from Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. Mis'ar bin Kidam, these are from the Muhaddithin. And likewise Abu Bakr bin Ayyash, he took knowledge from Abu Hanifa. And likewise the famous Imam Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak is a famous Imam amongst the Imams of the Salaf. He took knowledge from Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala as well. Abu Ishaq al-Fazari and Waqi', who is the teacher of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. So we see that all of these are from the students of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. This now leads us to the scholars who have spoken of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. First of all, Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, he said, Imamu ashabi al-ra'i wa faqihi ahli al-Iraq, that he is the Imam of the people of Ra'i. And we shall explain what this means in a short while, inshallah ta'ala. The Imam of the people of Ra'i and the faqih, the jurist of the people of Iraq. And likewise Ibn Kathir rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, Faqihul Iraq, that he is the jurist of Iraq, wa ahad a'immatil Islam, and one of the leading Imams of Islam, and from the notable leaders and one of the pillars amongst the scholars. This is in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. Likewise Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah ta'ala, he said about him, Kana min adhkiya bani Adam, jama' al-fiqh wal-ibadah wal-wara' wal-sakha, that he was from the very intelligent ones amongst the sons of Adam, and he gathered together fiqh and ibadah and the awe and piety and generosity. And Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, An-nas fil fiqh iyalun ala Abi Hanifa. Imam Ash-Shafi'i said that people, when it comes to fiqh, they are dependent upon Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And Ibn Abdul Barr, he narrates from Abu Dawood as-Sijistani that Abu Hanifa, he was an imam. So all of these scholars establish and mention, no doubt, that in terms of fiqh, in terms of the jurisprudence, that Abu Hanifa was indeed an imam from the imams of the religion. We come now, there are many other statements from the ulama which mention, we shall come to them shortly, but we come now to a quotation from Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala. And in this quotation there's an important lesson for us. Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala, he says in his book, which is the explanation of Al-Wasitiyah, he said that there was a group of people called the Sumaniyah. Now these people are a group of Hindus. They are like a branch of Hindus from India. And they came to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. They came to Abu Hanifa. And they began to debate with him with respect to a creator, whether there's a creator or not. And Abu Hanifa, as we've already established, was one of the very intelligent scholars. And he said, so they had an agreement, and he made a promise that we will meet together and we will have a debate on this issue. So then they came at this meeting place, and then Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, he came and he said to them, they said to him, what do you have to say? What do you have to say? So he said to them, I'm thinking of something that I saw. I'm thinking of a ship. And this ship is full of merchandise and food. It's full of merchandise and food. And I can see that it's coming and moving, sailing and coming to a port. And then what's happening is that the goods and the merchandise are being removed off the ship, and then the ship is going again. And then it's coming back again with more merchandise and more goods, more food, and it's being taken off onto the port, and then the ship is going again. And all of this is taking place without anyone steering the ship, and nor any porters who are taking off the goods off the ship. This is what I'm thinking of right now in my mind. This is what I'm thinking of. So he put this to them, and so these Hindu Sumaniya, they said to him, are you really thinking of this in your mind? Are you really thinking this is possible? And he said, yes. He said, yes, of course I am. And then they said to him, you have no aql. You are a man with no intellect, with no aql. And they said, can it be understood that a ship and a boat can come like this, be steered, and the goods and merchandise are taking off, and then it goes again? He said, this is something this is not understandable, which means that you don't have any intellect. So then he responded to them and he said to them, how can you not understand this? How can you not understand this example that I've just given to you? When at the same time, you understand and you think in your minds you are thinking of the heavens and the earth and the sun and the moon and the stars and the mountains and the trees and all of the animals and all of the men. All of this, you are thinking of this in your mind, that all of this is without a creator, without a maker. Right? So what I'm thinking in my mind is insignificant compared to what you are thinking in your mind as to how the universe is operating and how you see all these things around you, which everything works in order and regulation. There are wisdoms in everything. So he basically put this across to them and said that you are the people who've lost your minds. You are the people who are deficient in your minds. So when they got this answer, they knew that Abu Hanifa, he responded to them in the same way that they were trying to ridicule Abu Hanifa. So therefore they were unable to answer him. Because if you're using an argument against someone, and that argument is counter-argued against you in an even stronger way, you've got no answer. It's impossible for you to answer. So they knew that he had obviously overwhelmed them. Now, this story, there's an amazing benefit in this story. You have to really pay attention to some benefits that we can take from this story. This story is crucial and important because we can see the difference between the argument of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala in establishing and proving a creator on the one hand, because he's used an argument which is rooted in the Quran. So the difference between the argument used by Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala and the argument used by the people of Kalam, the Ilmul Kalam, the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila and the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. Because the Maturidiyah, they ascribe themselves to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. But their theology, the aqidah that they are upon, it is founded upon something that Abu Hanifa was not upon and was never upon. Right? So, Abu Hanifa, he argued, how did he argue? He used an evidence in which in the Quran we call it the evidence dalilul ikhtira'. Dalilul ikhtira' and dalilul inayah. Right? This is an evidence in the Quran for the existence of a creator. The evidence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala originating things and creating things, and the evidence of Allah's perfection and skill in the creation. So this argument used by Abu Hanifa was from this angle, and it is taken from the Quran. Now, if you look at the people of Kalam, the Ahlul Kalam, the Ilmul Kalam, the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila, the Ash'aris and the Maturidis who ascribe themselves to Abu Hanifa, you will see that they have made, and remember at the beginning we spoke about something called the Usuluddin. Right? So from their foundations of the religion is that they have used an argument to prove the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which in its foundations, it goes all the way back to Aristotle. Aristotle is a Greek philosopher who was present before the time of Isa alayhi salam, 322 BC. So this man was a misguided star worshipper, an idolater, and he wrote much about the natural world and about many different sciences. And in his books, he also spoke about, he spoke about the existence of a first cause, and he used a certain language, bodies, accidents, ajsam, a'rad, and all of this type of language. This is what came to the Muslims in the 2nd century after Islam. This is what became the foundation of ilmul kalam. This is what Jahm bin Safwan and the Mu'tazila and later the Maturidis and the Ash'aris, they all began to use this baggage and this terminology and this science. They began to use it in debates and arguments. And then they used this language in order to to create a way of arguing for the existence of a creator. Right? They used this language. And so this method, what they invented, is something that Jahm bin Safwan and the Mu'tazila, they are the ones who brought this method. And they began to debate against atheists, but in a way different to how Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala was arguing. Abu Hanifa took this method from the Quran. The Ahlul Kalam took their methods and their foundations from the philosophers, the Greek philosophers and other people besides them. So in this story, because we hear this story often, you will hear this story mentioned. Who's heard this story before? Put your hand up if you heard this story. Have you heard this story before? Yes, many people have heard this story before. This means that this story is known and widespread, but there's an important lesson in this, in that we see that Abu Hanifa is unlike the people of Kalam who ascribe to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And this story is an evidence and a proof of that. And then we see there are other narrations from some other scholars. For example, it was said to a Bedouin, it was said about a Bedouin, how do you know about your Lord? How do you know your Lord exists? He said that tracks on the ground, they are an evidence of the traveler. So traveling tracks on the ground, they are an evidence for the one who is traveling. And likewise, when you see the camel droppings in the desert, they are an evidence of the camel. They are a direct evidence of the camel. And likewise, when you see the sky, and you see the valleys, and you see the oceans, all of these are evidence of the one who is As-Sami' al-Basir. Right? So here, this is another type of evidence similar to the one that Abu Hanifa used. And all of this is different to the philosophical, the deep, the long-winded, complicated methods that nobody even understands. Nobody even understands those methods which are used by the Ahlul Kalam, the people of Kalam. What you find in the books of the Ash'aris, what you find in the books of the Maturidis, right? all this, if you were to start using this word, you wouldn't know what on earth is going on. There are attributes in bodies, and attributes always come after bodies, and therefore that means the bodies are hawadith, and hawadith means that they came. This language, 99% of the people won't understand what on earth is being spoken of when you start mentioning all of this nonsense. And that's why the people of Kalam, they say themselves, like Al-Ghazali and Fakhruddin Al-Razi and other people, they say that if we were to start speaking to the average common person with this language that we write in our books, and we start saying to them, Allah is not a body, He's not an accident, He's not an event, He's not in the universe, He's not outside the universe, He's not above, He's not below, He's not in a place, He's not in this. If we came to the people and started using this language, 999 out of every 1,000 would become atheists. They wouldn't accept a Lord and a Creator who's described in this way. This you find written by Al-Ghazali in one of his books. You find Al-Razi saying the same thing. So the point being here is that Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he was not from the people of Kalam. He was not from the people of Kalam. And those who ascribe to him, who come after him, who came centuries after him, from the Maturidis, then they ascribe things to him which he is free and innocent of, and which can never be found in any of that which is narrated from him, or that which he's claimed to have written. So anyway, moving on from this, we see Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan. So we're speaking about the comments of the scholars about Abu Hanifa. Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan, he says that Abu Hanifa, when he was asked about Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he said about asking for Allah's mercy upon Abu Hanifa, he said, rahmatun wasi'atun, that we ask for a vast amount of mercy upon Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. And may Allah pardon him. He is our Imam, huwa imamuna wa qudwatuna. Whoever is pleased with this, then he is pleased. And whoever is angry with this, let him be angry. Yes, that we ask for mercy upon Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And we see in another place, Sheikh Al-Fawzan, he says about Abu Hanifa, he says, Abu Hanifa says, إذا جاء القول عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فعلى الرأس والعين وإذا جاء عن الصحابة فعلى الرأس والعين وإذا جاء عن التابعين فنحن رجال وهم رجال. So Shaykh Al-Fawzan, he quotes this, he says that Abu Hanifa said, when a statement comes from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we should be standing to attention. And when a statement comes from the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, then again we should stand to attention. And when a statement comes from the Tabi'een, then they amen and we amen. And the reason why he said this, the reason why Abu Hanifa said this, is because his knowledge was taken from the Tabi'een. He was a contemporary of the Tabi'een. As the Shaykh says, لأنه رحمه الله تعالى كان من أتباع التابعين وتتلمذ على التابعين فأبو حنيفة هو أقدم الأئمة الأربعة. So he said, this is because he, rahimahullah ta'ala, he was from the followers of the Tabi'een, he took knowledge from the Tabi'een, and he is from the foremost amongst the A'imma, from the great Imams. And likewise we have a statement here from Sheikh Zayd bin Hadi al-Madkhali, and he's asked about speaking ill of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And he said, it is not to be said that Abu Hanifa is a mubtadi' or dal. It's not permissible to make the likes of this speech against Abu Hanifa. Rather, he's from the great Imams. He's oldest of them in age. However, no one is free from making mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And anyone who is found with a mistake, whether it be Abu Hanifa or any others, then this is something that no one is free from. None of the messengers, none of the prophets are free. No one except the prophets and messengers are free of making mistakes. In other words, everyone besides the prophets and messengers, they make mistakes. And so if anything in his speech, there occurs anything in his speech, then this is to be explained and corrected. But as for speaking ill and using the likes of these words and using this criticism, then all of this is incorrect, and to warn people from his fiqh, all of this is not correct. He says, هذا لا يقوله أهل سنة لا اليوم ولا قبل اليوم. That Ahlul Sunnah don't say this today nor even before this day. And then he continues and he says that anyone who makes a mistake from the Imams is not to be reviled, rather the mistake is to be made clear by way of evidence from the Quran and from the Sunnah. And anyone who makes an ijtihad, and he mentions the hadith, anyone who makes an ijtihad, he will receive 2 rewards, and is correct, he will receive 2 rewards, and anyone who makes an ijtihad and he's incorrect, he will receive only one reward. So this is how we treat the scholars, and this is our perception towards them. So from that we see that this is how our scholars, they look towards Abu Hanifa, just as they look towards any of the other Imams, like Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad, that all of it is a uniform position. And in fact, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions in one of his statements that none of the 4 Imams ever deliberately intended to oppose an evidence from the Quran and from the Sunnah. This is what Ibn Taymiyyah says in defense of the 4 Imams, Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad, that no one deliberately intended to oppose any evidence from the Quran and from the Sunnah. So this shows that any mistakes that they made, they were matters of ijtihad, and those errors are corrected, and mercy is invoked upon them, and they are spoken of, with that which is good. So now that we've established Abu Hanifa, his name, his lineage, how he started to seek knowledge, who were his teachers, the early part of his life, when he was involved in argumentation and debating with the different groups and sects, then he turned to fiqh in the religion, getting fiqh from Hamad bin Abi Sulaiman, and how he became skilled in that after 20 years. We mentioned some of the statements of praise from the ulama, which recognize him for his fiqh. Now pay attention. The scholars have specialities, and Abu Hanifa became well known and famous for his fiqh. But at the same time, there were other areas in which Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, where there are things mentioned about him. For example, in terms of hadith, we don't see that he narrated a great deal of hadith like the other Imams. Like the Imams present in his time, like Sufyan al-Thawri and Imam al-Awza'i and Imam al-Zuhri and the great Imams of the Salaf who were involved in hadith. So Abu Hanifa's narration of hadith was limited compared to the other great Imams. So this is one thing which is mentioned. And the other thing which is mentioned as well that we alluded to earlier on is that in some aspects of belief, in fact in the issue of Iman specifically, then there was